Hello, this is David Webb, and tonight I am going to make a video of Game 5 in the 2007 US-UK Internet Scrabble Tournament. The series is the best of 9 games and it currently stands 3-1 to the US. Tonight's game is between John O'Loughlin of the US and Ed Martin of the UK. This is the 4th year in which the US-UK Internet Scrabble Tournament has taken place, and at the moment the UK is leading by 2-1, but the US are making a strong showing in this year's tournament with their 3-1 lead. Certainly a win tonight would put them in a very strong position. We join the game and John has started immediately with a bingo, Asinos, and he's played that with just 7 seconds on his clock elapsed. We're now looking at Ed's rack. It's not a bingo-y rack, but it's quite a nice rack. He's got the Z, so he will be looking to score well using the Z. As usual, we have the company of our railbirds tonight, and we can see their comments in the right-hand side of the screen. Let's see what they're recommending in respect of this rack. We've got our Budev suggesting Azo at G6, which is across here, and that's a nice play because it puts the Z on this double letter square. So that move is going to score between 40 and 50 points. In the same place is also playable Azon across here. Now that's even better. It scores 5 extra points. Another suggestion is Wiz and Zar. Now the good thing about that move is that it gets rid of the W as well as the Z, which increases bingo possibilities for next go, but the bad thing about it is that it opens up this triple word square line. There's a third possibility for playing a word at the Azo spot, which is Azido across here. A-Z-I-D-O. Wow, that was quick. Ed plays the riskier move Wiz, and John replies with Kermis, and it's not good. I wonder if John was confusing that with Kermesse. And we can see that Kermesse would have been valid. Well, that must have cheered Ed. To go behind by 2 bingos in the first 2 moves of the game would be a little disheartening, particularly after the drubbing he received at the hands of Jeff Thieveknot only 2 nights ago. One interesting fact is that having played the phony Kermis through here, he could actually have played the real word Kermesse through the E here. Now, will he try Kermesse next go if this E remains open? And from Ed's point of view, does Ed know Kermesse? And if so, will he try and block it? Ed is in a similar position to last go in that he has not got a bingo rack, but he has a rack nicely balanced with vowels and consonants, and ought to be able to score reasonably well and have a decent rack leave. One possibility would be to play Hod across here, or Odah across here, O-D-A-H. They're both good scoring moves, which put the H on a double letter square, and both of them would block the kermesse bingo that John currently has. Ed is taking his time over this move. His clock has already gone down by 7 minutes, and he's only made one move. I wonder what is going through his mind. Although I said earlier that this is not a rack with a bingo, I don't know that for certain, and perhaps Ed is anxious not to miss a bingo in the way that he missed Becrimes 2 nights ago, which I believe was also on his second move. Well, Ed has played Howl, which scores well and sorts his rack out, but it does leave the E open. So will John play kermesse? Once you've played a phony, you really don't want to play another phony straight away. So if John had not played the phony, he may have been more willing to try kermesse, even though he wasn't fully sure of it. He may, however, now be more cautious and play something else. Right, it looks like there was a bingo through the eye. It's Kermises, and John has played it, and that gives him a 110-point lead. And Ed is looking at a rack with 2 duplicate letters, a duplicate A and a duplicate N. And duplicate letters tend to diminish the likelihood of your rack being capable of creating a bingo. Ed will not have any difficulty in leaving himself with a decent rack leave. The issue he's facing with this rack is how to score reasonably well, because he has no high scoring letters on his rack. A couple of possibilities are Dan across here, or Dan down here, or possibly nadir, but that would be a little dangerous, as it would open up this triple word lane, and it would also leave him only 2 tiles. Whereas given the good tiles that he has on his rack, a rack leave of AIRN would be preferable to one of just 2 letters. Kermises was an excellent spot on John's part, particularly after playing the phony kermiss, and with a similar word existing in the form of kermesse. That looks a reasonable move by Ed, scoring well using the K as a substitute for the absence of high scoring tiles on his rack. And John is flying. He plays vowelize. That is a terrific spot. Very impressive indeed. And poor Ed is 160 points behind and suffering. And our delightful railbirds are enjoying this game with us. Zootgleer whispers, "Woot die, UK die." Charming. And Magic Hour is showing a little more compassion. Poor Ed, he's not had the best of luck with tiles in these games. And I would echo that. All credit to John, however. The bingos he's playing are impressive. Kermises and Vowelize are terrific bingos. Ed plays Year for 21, and John does not appear to have a bingo on his rack. Shock horror. But he is in a comfortable position with a lead of 140 points. And his rack is nicely balanced in terms of vowels and consonants, and it contains high-scoring tiles. So he'll be looking to score at least 20 and possibly 30 points with this rack. One nice word that's been suggested is pedicab, which plays across here. And that gets rid of a lot of letters. In fact, it just leaves the U on his rack. One advantage of playing off 6 tiles when you're 140 points ahead is that it expedites the end of the game. It also increases your chances of picking up the remaining blank and other good tiles, such as the S's. After playing his opening 4 moves very quickly, John is taking a little more time over this rack. The problem with this rack, or one problem with it, is rack leave. When you haven't got a bingo on your rack, your initial instincts are to play in such a way as to leave yourself with a decent rack leave, and in this situation that's almost impossible. One possibility John could play would be up across here. It scores reasonably well, around 20 points, but it does have quite a poor rack leave, leaving A, B, C, D, I. Upbraid, that's a nice play. It scores 28 points and turns over 6 tiles, and it leaves a C on his rack, which is better than the U that would have been left on his rack had he played pedicab. It's quite an open move. It doesn't close the board down. In fact, it opens up possibilities for playing down here, which would be particularly dangerous, given that the Q is still out. And Ed plays aha. He had 3 A's and he's played off 2 of them. And John's high turnover strategy has paid off in that he has picked up an S. He nearly has a bingo with co-rulers. If there was a floating E in the right place, he could play that. But I don't think there are any bingos that are playable. John takes out the triple word square danger that he opened up when he played Upbraid by playing curl, which also resolves the duplicate R on his rack. Back with Ed, he's picked up the J, so he will be looking to score well with this rack, but there is certainly no bingo that I can see. And the railbirds seem to have gone quite quiet in terms of suggesting moves. Perhaps they're a little dispirited by the UK's 170-point deficit. But I'm sure Ed will man up and not let this game be lost without a fight. Come on, Ed. Ganja. Very nice. And that scores 49 points. That is a terrific play. John's rack looks like it. He may well have a bingo. A railbird has suggested out rows, but that is a phony. So I do not think we're going to see John playing that. And I would expect John to be fairly confident about spotting a bingo with this rack, because it's quite a high probability rack. By which I mean that the letters on it are letters which are some of the most frequent in a Scrabble set. So in terms of learning words, a bingo made from these letters would appear quite high up in a list of bingos in probability order. And top Scrabble players do tend to learn their bingos in probability order. A simple play of OU would leave John with a terrific rack leave of EORST. But maybe that isn't playable. John is again taking his time over this move. Ed's last move of Ganja has narrowed the gap. He's still a long way behind, 120 points. But were Ed to get a bingo, then John would be catchable. This is a very open board. An S or a D can go on the end of vowel-eyes, so that's a bingo lane. And John goes for score. He burns his S to score 32 points with Roos. Ed has a rack which is looking more bingo-y than his previous racks, but I don't think there is a bingo with this rack. Certainly none of the railbirds has suggested a bingo yet, and they're usually pretty quick to suggest a bingo if they see one. This rack is so close to a bingo that it presents a problem for Ed, in that if he plays off too many tiles, he is playing off bingo-y tiles, and that's something he'd rather not do. But if he plays off too few tiles, he's not going to score well. Ed plays idle for 22 points. And John has an awful rack with 2 U's and 2 I's. But far better to have an awful rack when you're 130 points ahead than if you're 130 points behind. Ed's play of idle took out this bingo lane, but in its stead he has generated a bingo lane across here and down here. So he's kept the board as open as he can. John would be looking to play off a U and an I to resolve his duplicate tile problem, but that's easier to say than to do. And in fact he's changed. He's changed 5 tiles. I don't know what 2 he's retained on his rack. Back with Ed, and he plays pelting. Well done, Ed. And that's terrific for Ed. That's really turned things round. Ed is now only 50 points behind. But John's change of 5 letters has paid off, because he's got rotting on his rack. Now rotting itself doesn't play, so John will be looking for a bingo that does play, and there may not be one. And suddenly this game has changed in complexion. Ed's cause looked hopeless, and it doesn't anymore. Of course, we don't know what Ed has picked up after playing pelting. We can see the remaining letters down here. So Ed will have 7 of those, and they include the blank and several E's. John plays Git for 25, giving him an 80-point lead, and Ed has picked up 3 of those 5 E's. Unfortunately, he has the U and the V, which is one of the worst combinations of 2 letters to have on your rack. And it should be noted that all the S's have been played. And the fact that the S's had been played meant that this bingo lane was not as useful as it would be if there were S's in the bag, and Ed's play of Eve has allowed for bingos ending in R and N to be played down here. John plays XI for 50 points, which is a bit of a blow for Ed, having clawed his way back into the game. He's now, well, I was going to say he's 100 points behind, but he plays out Breed, which is a terrific spot, and he's now only 30 points behind. And John has got the 2 U's on his rack. And just look at the tiles that are left. Ed has precisely half of those tiles, so there is a 50% chance that he's picked the final blank. And we could be in for a thrilling climax. Our railbirds are suggesting Uri down here, and John plays a similar move, Undy. Ed has drawn the blank, but he's also drawn the Q. He's 67 points behind. He probably needs a bingo to win. One possibility would be just to play the Q here, QIS. I'm wondering if there's anywhere else that he can play the Q. I don't think holding on to the Q can be a winning play. The trouble with just playing QIS is that it keeps the F and the M on the rack, and there are very few bingos which contain both the F and the M. But I think Ed has no possibility of playing the Q and the M or the Q and the F. Perhaps he should play off the F and the M and use the blank as a U with the Q. I think Ed is a massive underdog in this situation, but I don't know if his position is hopeless. The game is certainly a lot closer now than it looked like it was going to be after the first few moves. One of the railbirds is suggesting QIS at K4 and a prayer. Well, that probably sums up the situation from Ed's point of view. Back to John. And he will be looking at the remaining letters and wondering if Ed has a bingo. And he doesn't know that Ed has got the F and the M on his rack, so from John's point of view, Ed could well have a bingo on his rack. And there are a lot of floaters, as well as this bingo lane down here, and the one down here, given that pelting, I believe, takes an S on the end. And of course bingo lanes across here, so this is a pretty scary board from John's perspective. There are 3 tiles left. I wonder if he is perhaps contemplating playing off just 2 of those tiles, so that if Ed gets a bingo, then Ed will pick up the one remaining tile in the bag, and John will have one attempt to try and win by playing another word. If he plays off 3 or more tiles and Ed bingos, that's the end of the game. And that's what he's done. John has played off 2 letters. And like a shot, one of the railbirds has suggested riflemen down here. Now that is a fabulous word. Will Ed see it? And if Ed does see it, will it be enough to win? I think it scores 80 points, which would put Ed on 470, which is only a 4-point lead, and John could probably win. Well, that was a very interesting position for John. We won't know until we've analysed the game if Fawn was the winningest move that he could have played. Now, will Ed see riflemen? Yes he has. Excellent. Ed takes the lead, and we didn't think we would be saying that at the beginning of this game. Well, possibly at the very beginning, but not after the first few moves. John knows that Ed now has an A on his rack. John can't play out, so he knows that Ed will have one more play, so he will probably be looking around the board to see how much Ed is going to score with his A. He can then calculate how much he needs to score with his rack in order to guarantee victory. Let's see if we can replicate what we think John is doing. Okay, so if we scan across with the A, we can get 2 points by putting it there. Get 6 by putting it there. 6 by putting it there. 6 by putting it there. 7 by putting it there. And that looks like the best that Ed can manage. 7 points, unless I've missed something. So if we add 7 to Ed's score, we get to 477. So John needs to have a net score of 11. That means that he's got to take the score that he makes and deduct twice the score, twice the sum of the letter values remaining, and that has to equal 12 or more to guarantee victory. For example, if he played tut down here, T-U-T, that would score 15 points, and it would leave these 4 tiles on his rack. Double the tile value is 8, 15 take away 8 is 7, and 7 is less than 12, so he would lose. He plays tutor for 19. Ed is now 15 points behind. He can score 7 plus the 4, and that's good enough for John. So a fantastic fight back by Ed, but it wasn't enough. I imagine Ed is simply scanning the board one more time to see if there is anywhere he's missed for his A, and we don't think there is. I'm sure one of our railbirds would have spotted a winning play if there was one. And Pooh, which is Helen Gibson, who is the third member of the UK team along with myself and Ed, is saying that the best that she can see is Poa and La. Well, that's the best that we saw as well. So this has been a terrifically close game, but the US have won, and that gives the US a 4-1 lead in this tournament. They're on the brink of victory, but they haven't crossed the finishing line yet. And there it goes. Ed plays Poa for 7. It's the end of the game, and John O'Loughlin of the US has won by just 4 points. And earlier on, Ed challenged Kermises, and I think that was the only challenge of the game. That incurred a 5-point penalty. If he had not have challenged it, he would have won. I suppose at the time, though, Ed was so far behind that a 5-point penalty would appear to be very unlikely to swing the result of the game. Unfortunately for Ed and the United Kingdom, in this instance it has. But that's Scrabble. Let's do what we've done on previous occasions and quickly check for missed bingos. I don't think there were any, but let's have a quick whiz through and see. Gosh, when John played Vowelize, he also had Overwise. I didn't see that. This is a very quick check for lost bingos. I will be analysing the game fully using Quackle software, which has been written by John O'Loughlin and others, and is the best Scrabble analysis software available. Jason Katz-Brown, another member of the US team, has developed Quackle along with John O'Loughlin, and I believe there may be a third person who's also contributed to the development, so apologies for not giving that individual a name check. Okay, there were no missed bingos, so well done John and Ed, and I think tonight's game was a terrific advertisement for Scrabble. At the beginning of the game, after the first few moves, it looked like being a complete whitewash for John. It was, in the end, anything but, with a very close finish. Terrific play from both players, and I wish both of them good luck in the World Championships in Mumbai in a few weeks' time. I know that both players are studying hard for that tournament. Well, that's the end of this video. I hope you've enjoyed watching it, and any comments would be gratefully received. So, thank you and good night.